Well, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for our annual George Center for Honor Studies senior thesis presentations. A special thanks to Dr. Zarda for attending today. We appreciate your dedicated support of our students. These soon-to-be graduates of Greensboro College have spent the past 2 years working tirelessly towards this point. The thesis presentation is the culmination of their individual academic endeavors fostered and developed throughout their time in the honors program. The opportunity to share their diverse research and ideas is a significant milestone in their academic experience. Each student will present their work with some time afterwards for questions. We will have the first 2 presentations here, and then we have just a short break for refreshments, and then we'll actually walk over to Finch Chapel for the next 2 presentations if you're staying the whole time. Each student will have their thesis advisor introduce them. So first up is Dr. Henry Kuo introducing Miranda Morris.
Well, I hope everyone has not had a big lunch because the honors presentations today begin with a theatrical roller coaster. The past year, I had the great joy of advising Miranda Morris on her thesis. Miranda wears many hats on campus, and if I listed them all, you will not be having snacks at 3 p.m. today. Now, Miranda's former advisor, Professor Sheila Nair, had a lot of fun things to say about her. But at the end, as she summarized it, she has a lovely and lively and active mind, and her passion for theater is unmatched. And in the year advising her thesis, I wonder if that is an understatement. Now, when she presented her prospectus, I was immediately struck by her enthusiasm for Broadway musicals. But what really caught my attention was how she brought them in critical engagement with the poetics. And I shared that idea with some of my theologian friends. And I don't know if that's a commentary on the sad state of affairs in theology, but many of them were saying that that was a much more interesting topic than many of the theology dissertations that they had to suffer through. So I leave that with you for future thought. But anyways, as you will see, even though her thesis bridges 2 different disciplines and thinkers, her lively mind, her love for theater, and her diverse interests make the thesis and her presentation an example of the spectacular. So sit tight, put your side tables away, and without further ado, Miranda's presentation on Aristotle Needs an Update, Analyzing Spectacular Tactics for 21st Century Broadway Musicals. Miranda.
Hello, I'm gonna turn this for recording's sake. But for you guys, I'm just gonna project if that's okay. Gotta use that voice for the stage training somehow. Yeah, so this is my lovely title slide. Aristotle Needs an Update. So what my thesis is about, this is sort of the elevator pitch kind of. The Merriam-Webster definition of spectacle is something that is unusual, notable, or entertaining. So this thesis will borrow from that definition to contend that anything can be spectacular. And I studied a pool of 42 successful Broadway shows to try to find trends in spectacularity and to see which of those trends maybe produced something even more than spectacle. And this thesis will analyze these shows with the framework that is what spectacle is. It is a tactic. That was a lot of words. What does that mean? She said a lot of things that I haven't heard definitions to yet. So let's take a little step back and let's take a second to talk about Aristotle and poetics. So Aristotle was a sexist dude bro who mansplained how to write a tragedy. That's usually how I tell people. He thought that women were deformed men. He said that unscrupulous cleverness in a woman was inappropriate. So anyway, he loved me. And he basically was most famous for poetics. There was a second element
that we know must have been about comedy, but we don't have that. What we do have is poetics, and it's about tragedy, and he breaks tragedies down into 6 elements: plot, character, diction, thought, song, and spectacle. And for each of those elements, he'd be like, this is a plot. By plot, I mean the arrangement of the events in the story. And an example of a good plot is this. And that was how he wrote poetics. And then he got to spectacle, and he didn't do that. He got to spectacle, and he was like, actually, this thing, I don't care. He said that it is quite foreign to the art and has nothing to do with poetry, that it is much more dependent on the costumer than the playwright. So basically, his logic was the writer does not create the costumes or the sets, therefore he didn't think he needed to talk about it. Aristotle was also of the opinion that a play did not depend on its performance. According to him, you could read it and get the same vibe, you didn't need it performed. And also, you have to consider that spectacle in his day was basically costumes. If you look at ancient Greek theater, you had costumes and masks and a bit of a set. There were no fog machines. There were no $1 million puppets. That was what you had. For the sort of goal of all of these 6 elements in poetics, you had catharsis. Catharsis is the sad stuff. Long story short, if you've ever willingly rewatched Titanic, you should have an idea. So my first contention of my thesis was that Aristotle's ideas on spectacle, while serviceable for their time, need to be updated for modern theater making and modern theater audiences. So let's take a second to talk about what we're doing with modern theater. If you've ever seen a musical ever, you probably know already what you need to know, right? We have certain conventions of musical theater that we sort of expect now. When a scene ends and music starts playing and stuff moves, for us, we're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. That's a scene change. Like, that's not weird to us. We have these audience expectations. And we have so much more spectacle than just the sets and the costumes now, right? We've got lights, we've got sound design, the $1 million puppet. Oh, sorry, there's like a King Kong musical with a $1 million puppet, and I'm not over it. I'm still not over it. But because we have all of this different kinds of stuff, what Aristotle calls spectacle and spectacular, and what we call spectacle and spectacular, really doesn't tend to be the same thing anymore. So we needed to create a definition for spectacle that included what Aristotle said, but included all of the things that he could not have foreseen. And I also wanted to use a definition that kind of accounted for 2 camps of people: the average people who walk into an audience and think, what's about to happen to me? And the artists who create this stuff. And the Merriam-Webster definition actually worked really well for this. So we're going to say that spectacle is something unusual, notable, or entertaining. You will notice I did not say good. We'll get to that. So modern spectacle, again, looks very different than the Aristotelian. In terms of academic work about spectacle, most of that writing is about spectacle as a technical capability. Like, wow, we have fog machines available and we can build $1 million puppets. And that wasn't what I wanted to get at. I wanted to get at spectacle as an artistic choice, especially for shows that choose to be more minimalist than maximalist. Why is this like this? What effect does it give? And I wanted to view spectacle as a tactic to something greater, something that, you know, is the thing that makes us fall in love with theater in the first place. And Aristotle's goal was catharsis, but again, he wrote about tragedy, and that doesn't fit everything. So what we're going to say instead is we're going to talk about sublimity. This is borrowed from a dude named Longinus who wrote On the Sublime. Y'all don't care about him. But long story short, sublimity is an emotional response in the audience member. So for a drama, that could be crying. For a comedy, that could be laughing. For this, it's a lot of woo, it's great. So the goal of tragedy is catharsis. The goal of musical theater, we will say for this thesis, is sublimity. And we have this lovely sublime moment of fun home to demonstrate that for us. And so with this framework, what I wanted to know is I wanted to know what sorts of spectacle do we tend to see? What makes the spectacle work? What makes the spectacle sublime? What makes us feel the good stuff? And so how I planned to find out is I wanted to pick a good pool of shows to start with, something that was representative of what Broadway theater is doing right now. And I wanted to analyze them for these sort of qualitative, spectacular data points and see what I found from those. So this is my research methodology. What have I spent the last 2 years of my life doing? Watching a ton of musicals. I really can't recommend this project for most people. I did so much. They kept telling me like, Miranda, it's a thesis, not a dissertation. You can take it down a level. So I did pick 21st century Broadway, first and foremost, because I like it, so there. But actually, more importantly, because Broadway has bigger budgets, it's much more likely that their spectacular elements are a choice rather than the option that they were stuck with, where, you know, like in regional theaters, you've got $20 to make your costume and that's what popped out, you know? Also, thanks to technology and lovely people who bootleg things, not that that's legal, but it helped me out. Because the biggest limitation is that I can't transport myself back to Broadway in 2001 to go see Mamma Mia when it opened, or maybe it was 2002, whichever year. So that's, you know, it gets me kind of closer to that. So in terms of picking a research pool, again, we have those two camps of people. We have the theater geeks and the people with actual lives. And so basically the way that I decided to go about picking shows is I picked the major award-winning musicals of the past 20 years of the 21st century. And I picked the longest running shows, the audience favorites. So this is that list. I can't recommend watching 42 musicals for most people's sanity, I really gotta tell you. But you'll notice these are them in order here by date. And then these are these in order of popularity, longest running, and of course, Wicked is right there at the top. Gotta love that. So my research questions, what types of spectacle do they have? What makes it sublime? And then I also wanted to look at trends in spectacularity and sublimity, what consistently seems to work. But I also wanted to point out what I thought the trailblazers were, the cool guys. So as I was doing my research, I very quickly found out that a lot of what I was going to have to be looking at was going to be the court of public opinion. There aren't academic journals about Broadway theater, really. It's like Playbill and Theater Mania, and those are a lot of my sources. But in the court of public opinion, some shows are widely considered to be spectacular, but not sublime. This lovely Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark over here, it's one of my favorite examples. It was the running joke of Broadway for several years. But then some shows are controversial and are debated as to whether or not they are, you know, good or bad, or we would say whether or not they are sublime. I personally hate Dear Evan Hansen with a burning passion, and we could get me on a rant about that. I love Waitress, and some people think Waitress is boring. They're allowed to be wrong if they want to. So in looking at this, I very quickly found the second contention of my thesis, which is that spectacular comes from a gathered set of audience expectations that we have as a culture, and we can agree on it, but sublimity is more individual to the viewer than anything else. So let's talk about what I found about spectacle, and we'll get into sublimity. So I went ahead and I divided it into categories to make sense of it. So we have physical spectacle. This is the stuff Aristotle was getting at. This is his, like, it's, you know, the playwright isn't in charge of the costumes. So this is where we put that. It's the tech, anything that you physically see or experience. Written spectacle, I went ahead and had include basically his other 5 elements. Hello, normally I am waking up for class right now. This is normal nap time for me. I really called myself out there. That's going to go off 9 minutes from now too. But life is full of little interruptions. But written spectacle, I couldn't put this in a script if I wanted to. We'll get to that. That's the other 5 elements. That's your plot, that's your characters, that's your word choice. For musical theater, this also includes the score, which Aristotle called song. We have human spectacle, which is the stuff the people on stage do. So for this, it would be like really cool choreography that I can't do in these jeans, or like really good acting performances. And then this last category, I figured out I needed to have. It was a later addition. Extra textual is a word I kind of borrowed incorrectly from the literary world. Extra meaning outside, textual meaning the text. In this case, the text would be the performance of a given show, and extra textual, oh my God, would be from outside this show. So if there's a publicity scandal, or if there's a really important historical context to when this came out, that's incredibly relevant to the work. For example, if you know Walt Whitman's "Oh Captain, My Captain," if you take out the historical context of the assassination of Abe Lincoln, very different poem. So, generally speaking, what makes spectacle things sublime things? Generally speaking, I would say cohesiveness of the production. This picture is from Legally Blonde. I am in love with Legally Blonde, the musical. Don't even get me started on it. But if you look at this, you can see that the proscenium lights are pink and Elle's bedroom is pink, but then the blue matches the sky outside. How weird would this look if the sky were green and the proscenium lights were fuchsia and teal? You know, whoever said tangerine is the new pink is seriously disturbed. I would also say spectacle that does not distract, but that adds to either the story or the general feel of the show. Legally Blonde's a good example for that. I'm just gonna keep going because it's like the first thing I talk about. So here's some examples. I said spectacle that adds to the show. Legally Blonde has some amazing costume changes. This one is the coolest in my opinion because I still haven't figured out how they do it. But you can see this girl has like a fireman pole, and this is the same banner, and she's like covered in the face and the robe, and she slides down the pole and is magically ready to go to the mall with Elle, and it's just fun and it adds to the vibe. For written spectacle, if anyone's ever heard of Hadestown, the poeticism in that is amazing. This is the quote. I haven't seen a spring or fall since, well, I can't recall. That's what I'm working on, a song to fix what's wrong, take what's broken, make it whole. It's very poetical and it's everything. For human spectacle, I would say the amazing dancing done in Newsies. I don't know how their legs do that. It's a lot. And for extra textual spectacle, again, the absolute chaos that was Spider-Man show. Quo is so sick of hearing me talk about that show. He's like, we get it, Spider-Man was bad. But when we say bad, the absolute critical fury when it came out, Spider-Man is not only the most expensive musical ever to hit Broadway, it may also rank among the worst. Julie Taymor's $65 million accident-prone production, featuring an erratic score by U2's Bono and the Edge, is a teetering colossus that can't find its bearings as a circus spectacle or as a rock musical. So the critical flurry around this became a thing, and there was this culture of, oh, when I saw Spider-Man, it broke down for 30 minutes, and when I saw Spider-Man, we started 20 minutes late, and it was this buzz around New York at the time of how disastrous this was. So, contention 3, I realized very quickly that it was really hard to try to like say things about an audience based on what show, like the audience of a given show, but you can learn a lot about a person if they tell you what their favorite shows are. I figured that one out. I will keep my comments about Dear Evan Hansen fans to myself. But because sublimity is about the individual viewer, that's kind of the route you need to go there. Anyway, so these are my opinions. We all knew I was too opinionated, not throw them in somewhere. But for sake of this thesis, this was a little bit of a case study. And I created this sort of system for doing things that I would love to see replicated by someone with a very different background than me. So I kind of, it's a little ridiculous, but my sort of tool for parsing out the difference between just spectacle and something greater ended up being this tier list. I put all of the musicals I was studying into this little tier maker online, and you click and drag them where they go. So this is a sampling. There's like 42, they don't fit. Here's a sampling of the ones I'm planning to talk about. And so up here are the favorites, the spectacular and sublime. These are the ones that are pretty darn good. They're pretty okay. These are kind of bad, and I hate those too.
We noticed.
Yeah, we noticed. Yeah, literally, like there's a good couple of pages in my thesis right now that is just Dear Evan Hansen slander. And anyway, so at least in my opinion, and again, somebody else should come in and have a different one. Here are some things that I think are sublime spectacle. The production, and these are actually, a couple of these are shows that I did get to see on Broadway, which is why I kind of wanted to pick these shows. The production design of Waitress is incredible, and one of my favorite things is that some of the souvenirs that you can buy at intermission are little pies, and they bake them fresh in the theater. So when you walk in the theater, it smells like pies, and the whole thing takes place in a pie shop, so it's really awesome. I think the writing in Hamilton is killer. I don't think I need to argue that point. I think we can kind of agree with it. I love the play with diegesis. It's rap, it's poetry, it's awesome. I went and saw School of Rock on Broadway, and I didn't even think I was going to like it, to be honest. But they give you this audience announcement before the show even begins. They're like, ladies and gentlemen, this is to remind you that all of these kids are, in fact, actually playing those instruments. And you're like, yeah, okay, we know. And then you watch it, and they're so good, you don't even believe them. And you're like, how is that 10-year-old? Oh, this is why they make an announcement. This is why they tell us. And I remember watching that at 17 and watching a 10-year-old play circles around me on guitar and just being like, you go, dude. For extra textual spectacle, I personally think it's less sublime because it's not really related to the work. But I think the best example of this is when Mamma Mia opened. Mamma Mia was the first musical to open on Broadway after 9/11 hit New York. And I think it says a little something about New York culture, that they were like, we don't want Shakespeare, we want an excuse to watch ABBA on stage and have fun. And I think there is something very sublime and emotional about that. So conclusion, where do we go from here? For one, I made the little thesis ranking things. You can play along yourself. There is a category for if you don't know what a show is. I know that no one else is psycho enough to watch 42 Broadway musicals. It's okay. But basically, again, you can't say a lot about the audience of a given show, but you can learn a lot about a person through their favorite shows. I would love to see someone recreate this project. I would love to see the different conclusions that they come to. And I think that the fact that I sort of stumbled into this idea that sublimity was so subjective, like, duh, Miranda, that makes perfect sense. That's why we fall in love with theater. That's why we fall in love with art. If there were an objective solution to this thesis, I would have done a terrible, terrible job. And that is my little presentation. Thank you. Yeah, who's got questions? It's okay, I don't bite. I know I'm really extra. Yes, Dr. Zarda?
So a few years ago, Miranda, I read something comparing the spectacle of the facility itself in two areas: religious ceremonies in temples and so on, and in the beautiful great theater. Did you run into that at all about the facility itself?
Yeah. We did actually have a little bit of talk. There was that book you were talking about, The Empty Church. Yep. We did discuss that. That's actually, I tried to keep it, this is the condensed version of a very long thesis. One of the things that I talk about actually is that in terms of facilities, Broadway theater is inherently a little spectacular in itself, because Broadway theater explicitly is a specified set of theaters that are a certain distance from Broadway, the street, and they have to have a certain number of people in the audience. And these theaters get, revamped for different shows, as opposed to some types of theaters are how they are, and shows load in and load out. Whereas for a show like Great Comet, they edited around the theater and built into it. So yes, in terms of talking about facilities, that is a huge factor. For specifically the shows that this pool was, it was less of a great comment, didn't make it onto my list. I did get to see that live. For anyone who's very confused right now, they built their stage to stretch out into the mezzanine so actors could walk from a staircase on the stage and keep going all the way to the audience. And it was a really fascinating thing. And so in terms of walking into that theater and that whole experience, that's spectacle too. Absolutely. And the pies being pumped into the theater. Yes, that was I don't even like pie. I just thought that was so cool. So yes, that did come up. That was an excellent question. I saw a timid hand. Yes.
All the way.
All the way. Less timid hand.
Okay, I know why you don't like Dear Evan Hansen. We've discussed it. The Spider-Man, I didn't see it, so I have no knowledge based on it. Are you saying it was too much spectacle?
Yeah. So
Is that your argument?
So okay, in Miranda Morris's opinion, and not the mystical third person narrator of this Thesis's opinion, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark was basically, I can't say that word. That's a 4-letter word. This is a thesis presentation. A blank show is what we call it. No, this show was started because they wanted to do a Spider-Man musical, and they got a book writer to do it. And they got the director, Julie Taymor. And Julie Taymor is famous for doing The Lion King, if anybody's seen like The Lion King musical and those kinds of puppets. So they thought that sort of background would blend really well to this weird comic book style they wanted to do. And then Julie Taymor was like, actually, I'm going to dictate 4,000 things about your plot. And we're going to make the text so complicated, we almost can't execute it. And several actors got injured on stage in front of the audience during shows. It was panned for having a very weird back and forth score that didn't make sense. Some of the set was much more literalistic and like a skyline of New York. And then some of it was very comic book with, interesting shapes and lines. And they had a weird fly system that went all the way out into the audience. So sometimes the audience was part of the show and sometimes they weren't. So when I talk about lack of cohesiveness, Spider-Man tends to be the what not to do example in my book. And that generally was what critics said. Yes, yes.
Yeah, nice sublime moments in musical theater, music.
Yeah.
And I went to the regional performance of
Yes.
And the orchestra was fantastic, but it was only 6 people in there. They just had a lot of electrical support, for that. And so it's the music and the songs, which is musical to you, stands out for the music and the song.
That's an excellent question. So my favorite musical is Curtains. I created a slide because I figured somebody would ask me to have an excuse to talk about it. This show was, I'm extra. I'm a musical theater major, guys. This is not news. I absolutely love this show. It's written by the same people who wrote Chicago. The duo is Candor and Ebb. Those are their names. They're amazing. I love them. And I saw a regional performance of Curtains. I was 15 on a school field trip. And I remember not understanding why people did the whole dating thing. Because I had run away from weird boys in elementary school and I'd run away from weird boys in middle school. And then and when I was in high school, people were sticking tongues down each other's throats, and that didn't look like it tasted good. But I remember sitting there and listening to the score and the lyrics of a beautiful song in there called I Miss the Music. And it's so pretty. Go listen to Curtains. Oh my God, I will die on the hill, but it is so good. But there's a part in this song, the male half of the songwriting duo has been left to write a musical by himself. And he says, when you're writing a song with a partner, the room is filled with jokes and chatter. She says something, you say something. She writes a line, you play a vamp. But when you're writing a song without your partner, it's a completely different matter. No one tells you that's not funny. No one says, let's cut that bar. No one makes you better than you are. And that moment with the swell of the score and the horn section, I just remember being 15 years old and finally being like, that's why people do the whole love thing. That's what it is. And there's another song in here that I love called Show People. And it says there's a special kind of people known as show people. And it's talking about how, yeah, of course, that as crazy as our lives are, you know, and we have this weird schedule of 2 show days and all this kind of nonsense, how much we love what we do. And in days where theater has been less kind to me, I have held on to that. This actually does have a much bigger pit orchestra than I would say a production of Mamma Mia does. But absolutely is music important to spectacle. Hadestown is another really incredible example of this. It really blends the line between musical theater and opera, much like Hamilton does. And like being in the room with the trombone man playing his little heart out, dancing on that stage is an experience to behold for sure. And you had a question as well, right?
Yeah. So I understand your hesitation to say, to come down hard on, well, these are actually the good ones.
Right.
That combine, spectacle and a sublime response in the audience, because that is individual, right?
Right.
But it seems to me you also make a pretty good case that Aristotle actually does need to be updated.
Oh, for sure.
And so, I just, taken as a whole, modern Broadway musicals show us that spectacle can be intentionally used to get after the very effects that Aristotle says are important to tragedy, right?
Exactly, and that some of these shows have to be performed to get that, right? Because he thinks that you all just need to have it written down. And I'm like, no. It's funny that you talk about how Aristotle needs to be updated. Kind of part of the reason I ended up on this train was because I did a project for the amazing Dr. Keating's class. I personally really hate William Shakespeare's Othello, and I know that's an unpopular opinion. And I read it in high school, was just kind of bored of it. But I was like, there's got to be some reason that I'm the only person I know who hates this play. So I read it again for my Shakespeare class, and I hated it more. And I did this project for Dr. Keating's class where I took Aristotle's 6 elements and I took what he said to do and I applied it to Othello. And I was like, see, even Aristotle thinks it's bad, because if you go by him, Othello's the worst play ever to exist. It kind of does what he says a plot should do. It technically has song. Aristotle cares about song. The characters are not what he says characters should be. The diction flip-flops in a way that I don't think he would approve of. And so, at the time I was like, yeah, Aristotle justifies it, I'm right. Wait, why did Aristotle say that unscrupulous cleverness in a woman was inappropriate? And then I was like, oh, he's wrong all over the place. And if we applied this to now, it would never be right. And that did eventually become this thesis, so. Yeah.
But it's remarkable how this guy writing in the 300s BCE, just because he was careful and laid all this stuff out in maybe what one might argue was a fairly boring fashion, but it was clear. It was clear.
Yeah, very clear.
He just has set the standard ever since then.
Right, yeah. It's crazy.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Centuries later, we'll still study him, I'm sure.
Maybe we should move on to.
Yeah, anything?
Anyone else have burning questions?
I did have another bonus slide for why Dear Evan Hansen is so bad, but I won't put you through it.
Right, hello everybody. It is my honor to introduce Elisa Jordan Hernandez honors thesis presentation on the new fear of immigrants, federal immigration programs in local police departments. I truly admire research projects that deal with things that are sort of difficult to talk about, things that people don't wanna talk about, or things that people don't wanna see. And I also truly admire researchers who get out there into the field and try to talk to people and try to ask difficult and uncomfortable questions that people may not be too happy to answer. Elisa's project is a great example of all that. I think Elisa got out there, talked to people, did a lot of interviews with immigrants who are on the receiving end of these programs, and also did interviews with law enforcement personnel who are who execute these programs. And that's difficult to do. It's not easy to get people to talk to you for research projects, much less law enforcement people. And Elisa got it, and I think that to me that shows a lot of determination. It shows a lot of courage, I think, and I think Elisa's research project really does a powerful job of calling our attention to something happening right here in North Carolina now that not enough people really know about.
Right. I am very glad that Miranda got in front of me, because I am about to hit you with very much fear and sadness. So don't expect much of me.
It'll be catharsis, it's okay.
Exactly. We'll go with that. So this thesis got together because I saw that a lot of police departments were collaborating with federal agencies to make these basically enforcing immigration law programs that affected the lives of normal immigrants. And the immigrants who were affected by all of these programs around the country, they accused their local police departments of racial profiling, arguing that all of these police officers had incentives to make arrests, no matter who they were, if they even had a legal status or not. So during this presentation, I will explain, first of all, because you might be thinking, what is she talking about? I don't know any of these. So I will explain what federal programs are being or have been implemented in North Carolina, and what effect these programs have had in the immigrant community, especially on Salvadorians. I'm Salvadorian, so I had to dwell into that as well. So yeah, so I will first talk about the differences in all of these programs. So the first one, secure communities. This program was used as a federal information sharing partnership between the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The program intended to help identify aliens who are already incarcerated without imposing new or additional requirements on state and local law enforcement. The program was actually removed in 2019. However, just in that fiscal year, about 15,000 aliens were removed in North Carolina alone. So a program that hasn't been implemented in that year was actually used to remove these aliens. So the program is actually described by a lot of people as a devolution of discretion. It is argued that these programs devolve the discretion of police officers to determine who should be subject to immigration law, no matter their legal status. And the second one is 287G. This program was introduced to enhance the security and safety of communities by creating partnerships with state and local law enforcement agencies to identify and remove non-citizens who were able to be removed from the United States. Now, secure communities didn't have that partnership with local law enforcement. 287G did, and that was a stark change in the whole rhetoric of federal agencies. So in practice, the program, however, showed it
didn't actually do anything with arresting or removals. It just showed that police officers saw Latinos as inferior in a racial hierarchy. So many were questioned regardless of infraction, citizenship status, or nativity. A study found that these officers have started to use more explicit statements when talking about the people that they had arrested. They included their country of origin, they included their language ability, and their legal status. So that was a very far change from secure communities. Now, the newest one is the Warrant Service Officer Program. This program was created under the authority of 287G, and it is functionally a 287G program. The difference is that under this new program, they delegated officers to get less training than the ones in 287G, and they're only basically authorized to do one thing. They are only there to serve administrative warrants of arrest within the jail. So the officers are supposed to do only one job. However, in practice, they are also able to perform arrests like immigration officers within their jurisdiction. Since 2009, there are 9 North Carolina jails who have entered new contracts with this program. And since then, their criticism has not decreased. And I'm one of those people. I criticize them a lot. So out of all of these 3 programs, the Warrant Service Officer is the only one currently used in North Carolina. So what is the underlying problem of these programs? Well, that is exactly what I tried to understand while doing interviews with sheriff departments and also immigrants. The responses to this question are totally different, 2 ends of a spectrum. It's very clear. And on the immigrant side, it is reported that they have a lot of fear and mistrust in the police officers. Many of them don't feel comfortable or at home in their communities. And it's basically because they are scared of being detained. Many of them feel that having a federal program in their community is something that brings deportation closer to them. And what is interesting, though, is that many of them didn't actually understand what the program was. They had only heard about it. So they didn't know that they were not supposed to be subject to that program. So the immigrants, even if I tried to explain to them what the program actually was, they still did not like the idea of having that program so close to them. I love pie charts, so you're gonna see a bunch of them. Figure 1 is the response to the question, how do you feel about new immigration policies? I asked this question because if I ask them, how do you feel about immigration programs in your community? They're gonna be like, what? I didn't even know. So I asked this question instead. So many of them, more than 50% actually, the response was that they felt fearful. And then there are some of them who felt nothing, and it's valid. I love clear, honest opinions. But in figure 2, we see a difference in if they actually knew the program. Half of the interviewers that actually knew the Warrant Service Officer program, even if they knew it, it did not mean that they understood it completely. It just means that they knew it was there. But it's still, even if they got arrested and the police officer said, oh, this is under the Warrant Service Officer program, they're going to be like, okay, that's it. Like, there's no more explanation than that. So in figure 3, we see the response to the Warrant Service Officer. About 60% of the interviewees admitted to be concerned, and another 20% felt shocked. One of the people I interviewed actually expressed concern over the mental health of their community. He felt that the constant fear of deportation should not be normalized into an individual. That is why in figure 4, we see an almost unanimous feeling that the Warrant Service Officer does more harm than good. And families are actually left in uncertainty because no matter if they have legal status or not, police officers have the ability to arrest them in their jurisdiction. So the biggest concern is that sheriff's departments are not actually aware that this is happening in their communities. Their concern is focused on the practicality of the program and how they can implement it. The sheriff of Randolph County actually said that the program is a safe keep and is only used when necessary. The same can be said about Alamance County, whose officers looked kind of confused when I asked them if they knew that their community felt fearful. Because for them, the program should actually induce a feeling of protection. And that is the biggest problem right now. Since the sheriff's departments have not clarified the intention of the programs, immigrants interpret them in a totally different way. And that is when different sentiments start to grow in the community between them and the police departments. Nevertheless, I still felt like there was a need for me as a Salvadorian to speak for a specific group of immigrants. And that is because many Salvadorians actually have a temporary protected status. This TPS, as it's normally called, allows them to remain legal in the United States, and it is given to countries that fell into civil war or into other big concerns. And El Salvador actually has it since the 80s. Until recently, there were around 195,000 Salvadorians under this status. But this is set to change after a court case called Ramos et al. V. Nielsen. This court case concluded that the TPS should be terminated for various countries, including El Salvador. So out of the 40 interviews that I did, 32 of them were Salvadorians, and about 80% of them have a TPS status. Because of the decision of the court case, Salvadorians are afraid that once their status concludes, they will be the easiest targets for immigrant warrants, since they're already in this system. And if there are warrants that need to be served, North Carolina law enforcement can and would be able to serve them. So that was a lot. So I will explain it. I have a little summary. So I explained the differences in all of these programs and how the latest one trains officers to serve federal immigration warrants. We also saw that the program strikes fear in the immigrant community and in turn makes them distrust police officers around them. And finally, the problem of some Salvadorian immigrants who, after losing their protected status, are frightened that they will be easy targets for the Warrant Service Officer program. So, any questions? That was a lot. I know, I threw at you a lot. Yes.
So, I went to grade school here
Mm-hmm.
in the United States. I learned that most of us, European descent, we're all immigrants
Mhm.
here. We didn't. And so the Statue of Liberty, which says, give us your tire.
Mhm.
They chose to get up to talk. I believe strongly in open door, but I have no idea what that means. I know immigrants were screened in the past, and a lot of them who came here were asked to leave their countries. They were criminals, they were thieves, they were ne'er-do-wells. So, and then there's a question here. What I hear on TV news is only a previous president. What I hear is, how they're catching thieves at the border. The previous president said, they're murderers and rapists and stubborn nice people. So there's this perception that, and the Salvadorans have got it. The perception
Mhm.
that they're less than
Exactly.
other people. And I simply don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to deal with it when there's a whole legal entity, and particularly when it goes down to local police. What value is it for local police to be involved in enforcing immigration? So the question is, help.
I know. I would say the same thing. Well, I think there is, media covers the big stories. I can go in a big rant about how the media portrays immigrants in a bad way. But essentially, the media would only tell you, oh yeah, we catch this drug trafficker. All of the big people that they've catch, but they don't tell you about the thousands of people that are actually being deported for a car infraction or for being there at the wrong time. And that is the underlying problem, that because everyone sees in TV that immigrants are essentially a bad thing, especially coming from the South, we have this perception by police officers, and it brings more problems. So yes, it is a cry for help. I believe it is a cry for help. Yes, we'll go with you first. Yeah.
Did you share your results with the law enforcement agencies?
I did tell them that there were a lot of people in their community that felt concerned about that program. And I think I said it that they felt shocked about it because for them, it's just a program for their protection, protect other immigrants from the bad immigrants. But when it comes to the actual numbers, there's not that many bad people that are being deported. It's actually a lot of normal people, you would say.
So are they, as a result of what you've done, are they going to educate them? Why the program is there? What the protection is?
I'm not sure about that. There's a lot of mistrust from my part as well to them. And it is implied in my work as well that I don't really trust police officers with federal warrants. So I don't think that, in my opinion, I don't think they will do anything about it. Yes.
A more specific question, and I'm not sure you dug into this, but you were suggesting that there is, in the warrant service officer program, there's a gap between the power that these people wield and their training.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Did you see anything? Did you see any evidence that in itself is a problem, like that? How can I say it? Yeah, that these folks who are serving in this capacity literally don't know how to do what they're
Supposed to do.
what they have the power to do.
Yes, exactly. Well, it is shown that there's a lot of, they got less training than the previous officers who were delegated. And that is because, again, they were only supposed to do one job. So they were only trained to do that job. They were only told, okay, so if you ever get a warrant, you go find that person and you serve it. But essentially, they started doing more things that they were supposed to do. And that is when the training falls apart, because they don't know what to do with the people that they arrest, and they run them through a database, and they're like, oh, this person actually does not have any legal status. And that's when they don't know what to do. Do I call ICE and deport them? Do I just let them be there? And there's been a lot of back and forth. Recently, there hasn't been a lot of warrants to be served. So the immigrants who are actually in jail are not supposed to be deported. So yeah, there is a gap between the training that they get and the power that they're exerting, if that makes sense.
And that's, I'm sorry, just following up, I mean, that's kind of indicative of a problem for these local law enforcement folks as a whole. I mean, I've heard the complaints from other parts of the country where they're like, why are you making us the enforcers of immigration when we're supposed to be in these communities and we need the people to trust us?
Mm-hmm.
But now they don't.
Exactly. And it's supposed to be two different entities, right? Supposed to be the federal agencies and the local police departments. But now they've kind of like merged them in a weird way. So yeah, it's very, it just casts a very bad word for police departments. Mm-hmm. Yes, Miranda, because she had her hand up.
Yeah. First of all, I want to compliment the fact that you got this organized in such a way that my very fried musical theater brain understood everything.
Mm-hmm.
A+. I did have a question. I remember reading about the implications of DACA when it came out and the protections of dreamers. And I know that you got to do these sort of qualitative interviews with immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering what sorts of stories you heard, from people who might have been dreamers or parents with kids who would become as dreamers. And, what did you find out about them? And what were the implications of these programs on people who were like, I don't even know how I got here,
Yeah, well, there were some younger people that I interviewed who were DACA recipients. And I know DACA is kind of like in the air right now. So they're actually even more concerned, because if they don't have TPS, they don't have DACA, what are they left with, So yeah, I think that would be another group of people that would be extremely, extremely fearful of deportation. And they're young people, they're millennials, they're 20, 30-year-olds who are essentially doing the work of the country, So yeah, that is a lot of fear coming from them as well. Yeah.
Mentioned that a lot of the wrongful arrests, one of the problems with the WSO program are misadministration of power. But I was curious in your interviews with law enforcement if there was an evidence prejudice against the communities that they're working with, and so if you have cataloged that similarly to the responses.
Actually, there wasn't any prejudice from the actual sheriffs and the head of the program. They actually, as I said, they felt like the program was there to protect other immigrants. So they're actually not aware that the people that they delegate with these programs do have that prejudice. And I think that is another thing to bring awareness to actually tell the sheriffs that, look, you have some people in here that, you know, they are not doing the work that they're supposed to do. So yeah, there's not a lot of prejudice in, you know, in the heads of the departments, but there is a lot, you know, in the police officers and delegates. Yeah. Yes, Sydney.
So you mentioned that there was a lot of fear and mistrust with the police departments within the immigrant community.
Mhm.
Do you think that there is a way to help repair those relations between the community and the police departments, or do you think that damage has already been done?
I mean, it depends on the individual who's listening to that. I think there are some people who would be willing to change their minds about the police, and there are some people who are not. And I think the biggest thing that there needs to be done is that police departments actually have to tell the community what they're trying to do. And that is what they're not doing. They're not telling them that this is only supposed to be for people who are already incarcerated. If you get arrested, you're not supposed to be in that pool of people. So I think that is, you know, what needs to be done, and it depends on the person who hears it if they change their perception or not. So yes.
I just want to ask, how will finding out personally that for the situation, legislators or persons who can do something now to speak up for this particular area, to contact as a result of this?
Off topic, I have an internship at a advocacy app, and there's actually a lot of organizations that do that. I have not had the time to talk to them, but I think it is a nice way. The app is called Turn Up, by the way. If you want to download it, you can. I'm supposed to say that if I talk about it. So yeah, it is run by young people, and essentially the organizations are run by people who have the TPS protected status, or have DACA, or have any other type of help. And they're all like, well, if we're not gonna get this help, what are we supposed to do? Like, how are we, they're sending letters to their officials, they're campaigning for, the rights of immigrants. And I think that I may be a little bit biased, but I think TurnUp is a good way to do that. Because, it's an app, so you can look at it in your phone. I'm not supposed to talk much about that here, because you're going to see it in my internship presentation and showcase day. So we're going to talk about that another day. But yeah, so yeah, TurnUp. Like
UP.
Yeah.
Not IP.
UP.
TurnUp.
TurnUp. Yeah, TurnUp. So yeah, there is a lot of organizations. Yes.
So I've been an Alamance County resident since 2012, and just some comments. It's hard to not make comments about this, but because I've been following the news about the 287G program, and so I call BS that those that the officers in Alamance County were shocked that the community was about to respond, like, oh, they don't like this, because we made national news, like Terry Johnson and the whole sheriff's department made national news a few years ago when his racist comments and rhetoric came out, and I guess the news cycle moves fast enough that a lot of people have forgotten about that. But yeah, I think another important point about that program is that, like, the sheriff's department gets paid by the federal government. Like, they get paid a lot of money to be in partnership there. And so, and I would imagine that the officers who are doing that are supposed to know that. And so, Yeah, sorry. When I said I was calling BS, I didn't mean on you. I meant on their.
Yeah, I understood that part.
Like, I'm sure, in their perspective, it's like, they're getting resources for this. But okay, I do have a question though. Was it that program though recently or something, like just in the past few weeks? I thought I read something for Alamance County that they weren't, it had to do with like detaining, like the Alamance County jail functioning as a place for detaining ICE, like they weren't doing or something.
There may be something that has come up. I haven't heard much about it because I haven't been looking at the news lately. I should. But yeah, I did speak with Terry Johnson and he looked shocked. I don't know if he was actually shocked. Because I did read the whole court case. Like I sat there and I read through the whole thing. Very long. But yeah, it was hard to look at the person who actually made those comments and seeing him being like, oh, really? Like I didn't know about that. So I was like, sure, you didn't. So yeah, I think I would have to look into that part of it. I think the warrant service officer, they just have to hold them for like 48 hours, if I'm mistaken. Don't quote me on that. I should know, but I can't remember right now. So yeah, there could be something that has come up in the past few weeks that I haven't noticed, and I will look into that. Thank you.
And then also one other quick comment just regarding what Natasha was asking about, like advocates for change. So my representative in the NC House, Ricky Hurtado, represents that half of Alamance County. Isn't he like the son of Salvadorian immigrants?
I think so.
He's
Yeah.
the son of Central American immigrants.
Mhm.
Salvador. So I think it's an issue that's on his radar too. Of course, he's very much in danger.
We'll see about that. Yes.
Yeah, it would be interesting, the question of racism in the program. It would be interesting to see, and this isn't for you, but to see how much of that is actually, a structural part of having a program like this. It's not so much about what the individual officers believe, but put into that role where they're, essentially are being asked to profile, right?
Exactly.
I think that, there's a way that even well-meaning folks could get pulled into a pattern of thinking about this stuff that would be essentially racist.
Yeah.
And that's
that is a big problem that we have right now.
only we had a sociologist around here who is interested.
I think he's calling you out.
I think he has been helping her.
Yeah. Yes.
So this may not be a question for today. This is about your own membership of the Salvadoran community. You probably can't standing there today, but what's the attitude toward assimilation? I'm the first generation that my parents were all about assimilation. I was going to speak English on Hungarian. I was going to play baseball, not soccer. As a matter of fact, as I understand it, the only thing they didn't do was change my name. But my father had wanted my name to be Larry Carter.
Oh.
Because at that time, immigration, it appeared as if my Hungarian American community was, you assimilate, you become more obviously American. You have a feel for that in Salvador?
Yeah, I think in the whole Latino community, there is this saying that we came here to give you a better life, so you have to have a better life than us. And it comes in like, even if it's a little bit different because we do, like our parents really want us to speak Spanish as well because they don't know how to speak English. But you know, outside of the house, they're like, why are you speaking English? Why are you speaking Spanish for? Like, you have to speak for us, speak in English. So I think there is an assimilation. You know, the basic thing for Latinos is like, oh, you have to be better than your parents if you're a first generation here. You know, you have to be even the oldest, not even like for the younger generations, but like if you're a firstborn, first gen, that is a lot of toll. That is a huge load on them because you're supposed to get the best job that you can. You're supposed to graduate college. You're supposed to do all of these things that your parents were not able to do because you're in a better place than them. So there is an assimilation from parents to children. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no problem. And thank you. So,
Elisa,
thank you.
great job.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Sarah Taylor, and I teach classical and musical theater voice here at Greensboro College. It is an honor and a pleasure to introduce Josie Gold, who will be presenting her honors thesis entitled Sing Out Louise, the correlation between the female singing voice and characterization in American musical theater. Josie has been my voice student since her arrival at Greensboro College. From our first meeting, she impressed me with her tenacity, her cheerfulness, and her kindness. Josie is smart, she works hard, and she is curious. It is this curiosity and drive for discovery and knowledge that has made her honors project such a success. Josie's thesis explores in detail how musical theater composers use music to infuse their characters with emotion and impulse in ways beyond the power of the spoken word. She has pared down her full study to a few specific characters for you today. Having read all of the over 200 pages she has written so far, I am thrilled for her to share a distilled version of her research with you today. Before she begins, I must brag and say how proud I am of Josie's work and of Josie as a person. She is the one who has managed the timeline and completion of this project over the past 4 semesters. And she has done so while excelling in her classroom studies and growing as a singer and an actress. In addition to presenting her honors thesis today, Josie is a lead in this weekend's theater department production of Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, which they say is not about me, which I encourage you to see this Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. But first, I hope you enjoy her presentation today, and I look forward to her continued work as both a performer and a scholar.
Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it so much. The purpose of my thesis is to analyze the music women sing in American musical theater and identify the musical tools composers and lyricists use to create full, well-rounded characters. In theater, a character is brought to life through words, but in musical theater, when a character is so overcome with emotion that words will no longer suffice, she must sing. In a musical, the important ideas, the wants and needs, the thoughts of a character are explored via the music they create. My project focuses on 5 musicals: Oklahoma by Rodgers and Hammerstein from 1943, Guys and Dolls by Frank Lesser from 1950, Gypsy with music by Julie Stein and lyrics by Stephen Sondheim from 1959, Into the Woods by Stephen Sondheim from 1986, and Wicked by Stephen Schwartz from 2003. These 5 musicals span 60 years of American musical theater history, and these shows exemplify relevant trends and stepping stones of the genre.
For each musical, I conducted score studies where I studied the written music, character studies where I analyzed each script, and audio studies where I listened to the actresses from the original Broadway production, the film, and all Broadway revivals of each show. I also researched existing musical theater scholarship about the musicals themselves, as well as the individual characters, and I studied vocal function and vocal anatomy to learn more about the singing voice. Collecting all of this data provided a way to develop a deep understanding of each of these women and their development throughout each musical. In my honors paper, I analyzed the two leading women in each show through a musical lens. I look at the character development throughout the musical and how that is evidenced in the music written for them. All 10 women are discussed in depth in my paper, but for the purposes of this presentation, I've selected 3 characters to share. Louise from Josie, the witch from Into the Woods, and Glenda from Wicked. I chose these 3 women because out of the 10 characters in my study, they have the most drastic change in vocal sound from the beginning to the end of their shows. These vocal shifts correlate with the major character shifts in their musicals. Before I dive in, here are a few terms just to give us all a common vocabulary. So chest voice is the part of the singing voice with a lower pitch range. It has a rich, full vocal timbre and is often perceived as powerful. This is a chest voice. Head voice is the part of the singing voice with a higher pitch range and a lighter vocal timbre. In musical theater, head voice is sometimes referred to as a legit sound. Belting is a term used to describe a popular vocal style in musical theater. This style is produced when a singer makes a chest voice-like sound higher than the chest voice typically goes. This is a belting sound. Thanks. Now on to our first character of the afternoon, Louise from Gypsy. The original production of Gypsy opened on Broadway in 1959. Julie Stein composed the score, and Stephen Sondheim wrote the lyrics. The core of this play is the relationship between Rose and her daughters, Louise and June. The girls are in a vaudeville act, and they're trying to have a performance career. June is the star of the show, and Louise is always in the background. Their show opens with June and Louise performing Let Me Entertain You. Louise comes in quietly and out of rhythm, and Rose overruns her lines by screaming, "Sing out, Louise!" Hence the name of my study. Louise does not sing alone until halfway through the first act. On her birthday, the group starts to throw a party for Louise, but Herbie, the act's agent and Rose's boyfriend, interrupts by bringing in the executive who just booked their act on the largest chain of vaudeville theaters in the country. Louise's birthday is forgotten, and she retreats into the other room with her birthday present, a lamb, a real lamb, and she sings in a maternal manner and questions her age while lamenting the lack of attention she receives from her mother. Little Lamb is the audience's first glimpse and an opportunity to see Louise alone and hear her musically express herself outside of the vaudeville act. The song has a drastically different sound from any other number of Gypsy, and this contrast highlights Louise's differences from the people around her. This piece has a lullaby-like quality, and Louise sings in a quiet, timid head voice that can just barely reach the highest notes of the melody. This song's repetitive nature and its clean and clear sound imply that it is intended to comfort its audience. But Little Lamb's lyrics do not match its childlike appearance. Louise's music reflects her state as an adolescent woman who has not been allowed to grow up, but her lyrics reflect her maturity and the complex ideas of self-identity she's attempting to understand. Your
She can talk to the lamp, but it cannot answer her. She cannot receive the validation she seeks from her toys and pet. Louise will remain silent with her family, with Rose, until much later in the musical. Eventually, June leaves her family and the vaudeville act, and out of necessity, Louise becomes the new star. Louise tries to turn Rose tries to turn Louise into her sister. And as their act is failing, they are eventually unintentionally booked in a burlesque theater. Rose objects, but Louise convinces her that they need to perform their act. While there, Louise volunteers to replace one of the burlesque dancers. Over time, Louise also rejects her mother's control and finds her own success in the world of burlesque. When she sings her final song, Gypsy Strip Routine, she is utterly transformed. The timid, shy girl has been replaced by a confident, self-assured woman. In her striptease act, Louise sings Let Me Entertain You, her sister June's song from their childhood act. Now, Louise sings the song in augmented fourth lower than the original. This new key requires Louise to belt, as opposed to the head voice employed in the original. This allows Louise to have a richer vocal timbre and gives the piece a more mature connotation than its original version. So let me entertain you, and we'll have a real good time, yes sir. We'll have a real good time. Louise takes over her sister's song and makes it her own. In so doing, she is taking over not only this piece of music, but the narrative of Gypsy as a whole. Louise's musical progression from the quiet, timid head voice of Little Lamb to the powerful belt of Gypsy's strip routine parallels and depicts her character's journey of self-discovery and independence from Rose. Rose represents vaudeville and the past. Rose was successful there and stopped at nothing to keep their act going. However, Louise represents burlesque and the future. When we end the play, she is at the top of this new industry and no longer requires Rose's input or guidance. The next character I will discuss this afternoon is the witch from Into the Woods. Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods premiered on Broadway in 1986. The story focuses on popular fairy tale characters: Cinderella, Jack from the Beanstalk, Little Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel, the witch, a baker, and his wife. And it combines their stories via their journey into the titular woods. The exposition of this musical is a collection of musical scenes wherein each character is introduced singing their own personal dilemma. But the witch is different. Instead of singing, she speaks in rhythm. Greens, greens, and nothing but greens. Parsley, peppers, cabbages, and celery, asparagus, and watercress, and fiddleburns, and lettuce. He said, all right, but it wasn't quite, because I caught him in the autumn in my garden one night. The witch continues to The witch continues to tell her story in this manner, using internal rhyme and other literary devices to manipulate the sounds of her words. This verbal manipulation shows her intelligence. Her spoken means of communication is denoted as rap-like by Sondheim in the score, and is not utilized by any of the other characters in Into the Woods or by any other character in this study. It highlights the witch's uniqueness and Sondheim's purposeful differentiation between her and the rest of the group. During this opening scene, the witch reveals that she kidnapped Rapunzel as a punishment for the baker's father stealing plants from her garden. As the story progresses, the witch sends the baker and his wife on a quest to gather 4 objects to create a potion that will restore her youth and beauty. The witch intentionally avoids using her singing voice with everyone except for her faux daughter, Rapunzel. For the witch, singing means vulnerability. She does not show her true self to anyone but Rapunzel, When the witch sings Our Little World, there's a stark contrast between her usual sound and the sound she uses in this piece. And this contrast highlights the difference between her feelings toward Rapunzel and her feelings toward the other characters in Into the Woods. Children are a blessing if you know where they are. Nothing so distressing though as when they keep you guessing, so be sure you don't leave any doors ajar. Make a little world, our little world is big enough for me. Perfect, our little world is all it needs to be. Perfect. At the end of these musical phrases, the witch sings the phrase perfect. It is considerably higher in pitch than the rest of the song and is out of character for her musically. This sound represents the witch's impulsive need to keep Rapunzel close and her emphatic insistence that their familial situation is perfect. The witch feels vulnerable with Rapunzel. She shows her daughter her true voice. When the witch watches as the baker and his wife attempt to collect the object she requested, and their tactics result in destruction and unanticipated complications. Like that. Witch continues to avoid saying with everyone but Rapunzel, singing "Stay with Me" to her daughter, and Witch's Lament after Rapunzel is killed by the giant that descended from Jack's beanstalk. The only time the witch sings when it does not directly concern Rapunzel is Last Midnight. This song is her reprimand of the group, Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Jack, and the baker, for their actions throughout the entirety of the musical. The witch is furious with them and mocks their actions and intentions. For this song, the witch sings in belt with a vocal strength indicative of her anger and heightened emotional state. It's the last midnight, it's the moon's flat, nothing but a last midnight, everybody's smashed flat, nothing we can do, not exactly true, we could always give her the boy, no, of course it really matters is the blame, someone you can't blame, fine, that's the thing you enjoy, placing the blame, if that's the aim, give me the blame, just give me the boy. This time, the witch sings because she is so fed up with everyone around her that she can no longer contain her true feelings. She has a completely different sound in this piece than she does in her other songs. There is an intensity, a lack of control that the witch possesses that was not present in her other numbers. The melody of Last Midnight is more varied and complex than her other songs, which are repetitive and straightforward in nature. In this piece, she is constantly jumping from one thought to the next, and her melody and rhythms reflect that frantic structure. Having said her piece in Last Midnight, the witch disappears from the show and does not return until the finale. When she reappears, she sings a melody whose motive she first established when she sang "Stay With Me" to Rapunzel. Children may not obey, children will listen, children will look to you, for which way to turn, to learn how to be. Careful before you say, listen to me. Children will listen. The witch has found a newfound peace and that manifests in this completely different sound. She has become wiser and is warning the people around her not to make the same mistakes she did with Rapunzel. The whole company follows her lead and picks up her melody, providing a moment of unity and understanding. The witch finishes the musical singing with the rest of the company. Each character has learned and grown, and they are finally out of the woods. For my last character today, I will discuss Glinda from Wicked. Wicked by Stephen Schwartz opened on Broadway in 2003 and tells the story of Glinda the Good Witch and Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West from The Wizard of Oz. The musical explores the two women's relationship and highlights their fundamental differences, and more importantly, their similarities. The musical opens with Glinda speaking to the Ozian populace. Glinda is a political figure, and she has a public persona that is vastly different from who she is in real life. This difference between person and persona is perfectly exemplified in Glinda's music. She sings with a bright, legit soprano voice when she is speaking in public. Let us be glad, let us be grateful, let us rejoice by that goodness would subdue the wicked workings of evil. Here, Glinda uses her voice as a distraction. And she's singing that high, people are listening more to the sound she is making than the words she's saying. Throughout Wicked, Glinda is used by the wizard as a distraction from the real problems happening in Oz. After this bright soprano opening, Glinda launches into the story of her friendship with Elphaba. Upon meeting, the pair initially loathes each other, but they eventually bond and grow close very quickly. When the pair are alone in their dorm room, Glinda decides to help her new friend by teaching her how to be popular. Glinda is vastly different vocally and popular than she was at the top of the musical. In this number, she uses her real voice, her person voice, as opposed to the persona voice that she used at the beginning when she was a public figure. Glinda's sound in this song, while still predominantly in head voice, is utterly different than before. She's more comfortable with Elphaba and can express herself in a manner that the audience has not observed before this moment. Elphaba eventually leaves, and when Glinda is alone with the first final section of the song, she begins in a lighter place vocally, but then moves toward a mixed belt sound on the final note. The more comfortable Glinda is, the further she distances herself from that persona voice. Listen to this change in Glinda's sound in the selection from Popular. makes her realize that she is capable of more than that. By the end of it, Linda chooses to use her political powers for good. I hope that this brief window into these three specific characters has given you a glimpse of my honors research exploring the interaction between music and character, which is the crux of musical theater. In musical theater, music differentiates the emotional states of characters. The characters sing because words are not enough. These three women from my study are given the space to express themselves in their own voices, and each of them, throughout their respective musicals, changes into a different woman than she was when her show began. Throughout my exploration of these musicals, I was struck by the ways that each composer I studied crafted their scores to provide their characters with room to grow. Each woman has a unique voice, and her music reflects that individuality. Musical theater composers create conscious and demonstrable musical choices to convey who a character is to the audience. And they use their music throughout their shows to develop each character and provide auditory representation of the internal growth of a character. Thank you for your time and your attention today. If anyone has any questions, I would be happy to open up the discussion. Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
What moved you to make those shows specifically to like explain?
Yeah, so the first thing that I did was I wanted to have, Sarah and I decided that we wanted to have two characters within the same show to make it easier to compare, to kind of get rid of the argument, oh, well, that's just how that composer writes. But it's like, you know, these are two women in the same show that sound completely different. So I had all the shows that have two female leads that fit into my qualifications. And then I decided to make these 5 because they are, like I said, the stepping stones of American musical theater. Like Oklahoma is Rodgers and Hammerstein's first show together. There's plenty of firsts with Oklahoma. Josie is a diva musical, which was popular in the late 50s and 60s in musical theater. And then Into the Woods is a concept musical, which was really popularized in the 70s and the 80s. And then Wicked really takes all of these ideas, which Stacey Wolf wrote an excellent book about how Wicked takes all of these ideas from other musicals, takes other musical theater tropes, and how they were put into Wicked, but kind of twisted a little bit, right? And so I wanted to make sure that I chose shows that spanned a long period of time, but also were relevant to the genre of musical theater. Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned how The Witch from Into the Woods, her musical style is different not only from every other character in Into the Woods, but from any other character you researched. Can you expand on that? What do you think Songha was doing with that character?
Yeah, totally. The main thing that's different is how much she speaks in rhythm, and how that's not something that really the other musicals in my study really explore. And so that was the main difference for The Witch for me. And it was really about, like, normally when a character doesn't sing in a musical, it's because they're not important, right? But with The Witch, she's essential, but she doesn't sing unless she's with Rapunzel. I was like, that's fascinating. Why is that? And it's because she's trying to keep herself contained and she doesn't trust anyone around her. And she only sings when she's with her daughter or when she has to. Yeah.
I ran into this with my thesis a lot, so I'm wondering how you attack this. Specifically about how you talk about, you know, the character, you know, decision, kind of this is written to be more chest voices, head voices, but different actors come in to do different things. And I know you said movie versus Broadway musical line. I was dealing with the original Broadway production with 10 visual replacements.
Right.
So it's hard to like analyze, like, well, this person did something really different. So were there any interesting like actor changes? Because I know Carol Lindsay came in and Linda, that was like a whole thing because she was not that person.
Right. Yeah, I would say out of the shows in my study, Wicked was the one where there was the most difference between different actresses. Typically, if there was a stark contrast, I would definitely discuss it. But more, it's about the sound of the original actress, and the actress from the film and the revivals kind of not copy that sound, but that actress establishes what that character is quote unquote supposed to sound like. Yeah.
I'm curious on how you worked with this thesis to help you in Women on the Verge and then your character work.
Oh, this thesis has helped me so much. I can't look at a piece of music without doing this now. Yeah, definitely. It really has changed the way that I approach everything that I sing. And Women on the Verge specifically, my character sings very quickly. And I was thinking about, well, why is that? It's because her thoughts are running a mile a minute. And then there are other pieces where she sings slowly. And I think that that is her internal thoughts and the ways that she is expressing herself when she doesn't have to be all around everyone else. She can just be herself. So yeah, it's definitely impacted all my other work that I do. What else? Yeah.
Out of everything that you've spoken about today, what do you think is something that you want us as like leaders to follow?
I think it's that composers write their music on purpose. And like the choices that they make, they're not arbitrary. And they're giving you clues as an actor, as an audience member, about who the character is. I don't know, I'm looking at these. Are there any other questions or anything? Okay. Great, thank you.
All right, well, I know most of you guys, I'm Dr. Hernandez, and I co-advise President Trevor's thesis project, Dr. Elisa King. She's in the TESOL program at ECM in the Ministry Department. Trevor Mason is a math education major. He's also a very active member of our community. He's in, obviously in the honors program, Student Government Association. He works at the St. Copa Center and active in religious life. The list goes on and on and on. He's just one of those people that has a hand in just about everything on campus. I met Trevor when I taught the thesis design course. And when he started talking about this topic, I was like, yes, this is awesome. This is such a great idea. You should absolutely go through this. So Dr. King and I got our heads together to help him through this study. His thesis, Where Do I Fit In? A Qualitative Study of Black Male Educators and Their Views on Race, Schools, and Becoming an Educator, takes a critical approach to trying to discern the reasons that there are so few Black male teachers and why the Black men who are in public K-12 education chose this career path, what it took them to achieve their goal, and the barriers they've experienced in their journey to become educators, and the challenges that they face in the workplace. Trevor has found some really enlightening data through the interviews of his participants. So many insights that he has not only completed an excellent thesis project for the honors program, but he has plenty of data that he could use as a springboard for a master's thesis or doctoral dissertation, which I fully anticipate him to do at some point. After spending some time in the middle school math classroom, inspiring hopefully a bunch more of wonderful students just like him to enter the teaching field. Very proud of Trevor and all of his work, and I know that he's going to be an amazing educator. And obviously, Trevor, thank you very much for all of your hard work, and we are all looking forward to hearing the results of your study today.
Thank you, Dr. Hernandez, for that introduction. I just want to first off say thank you to everyone that came to watch the thesis project and this presentation. Really appreciate it. So I did this project because as a Black man, I never really saw myself and my teachers Growing up, most of my teachers were white women, and I only had 2 black male teachers growing up, and that was until high school. And sure enough, they said that a teacher and a coach, that kind of motif continues to be in the U.S. public school system, and you see that in power presentation. I felt like I had to give up parts of my identity sometimes just to thrive in school, and I'm sure like some of my other black male friends also share that same testament. So I wanted to kind of dive deep into why I mentally saw myself in a lot of my teachers and figure out why only 2% of all American public school teachers are black males. So that's who I am. My name is Trevor Mason. Through this project, we're going to dive deep and find some answers to that question. Just to introduce the topic, the low number of black males in the teaching profession has been a topic of discussion among educational scholars for decades, but very little has changed about the issue. Even though the call for more black male teachers mainstream across the U.S., in 2017, only 2% of American public school teachers were black males, black American males. It may be argued that the cause of the problem is racist hiring practices among the school administration, but the root of the problem may be intrinsically deeper than that. To further investigate the lack of black male teachers helps look at the perception of black males in schools. For example, in K-12 schools, African American students are disproportionately more likely than their white classmates to receive serious disciplinary actions for the exact same offenses. In addition, black American male teachers have historically been perceived by school administration more as disciplinarians as opposed to academicians. This study argues that the racist underpinnings of societal norms are one of the many reasons that prevent African American males from going into teaching and choosing not to work in schools. Through the study, I intend to compile thematic trends explained by black men that will continue to answer why the percentage of teachers who are black and male is so low. One of my participants that I had the pleasure of interviewing, the first one I interviewed, he talked about his experience in school. He had a lot of negative experiences. He felt like that his teachers never really got him or understood who he was. And as I was interviewing him, he went on and talked about the statistics of how often black girls are out of school instead of in school. And he asked this question, why would I want to be a part of something that's objective? And I think that was a very powerful statement to make as a black male educator going back into the field. He kind of overcame those obstacles and got over that and persevered and became educated. All right, so a little bit about the relevancy and background. The topic is relevant because it speaks to the current perception of black males in society. Too many African American men are racially profiled, harassed, and murdered by the police and ignorant people. Maybe if more black men were in teaching positions, portraying positive role models, black men would less likely be seen as problematic, as quoted by Hernandez. I hope to shed some more light on the narrative of the perception of black men in America with this study, and I wanted to provide insight into how black American males view their position in education. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics, in the 2017-2018 school year, 79% of American public school teachers were white, and 76% were female. The overrepresentation of white females in teaching leads to many demographically diverse populations, like in role models who look like them, arguably more so for black male students. Black American male students are too frequently faced with teachers who do not believe in their abilities, and who see them as they are portrayed in media as a burden and inclined toward criminality. This leads to disproportionate number disciplinary actions, as I mentioned before. The lack of Black males in teaching positions help perpetuate the stereotypes caricature of the intellectually inferior Black male athlete. As coined by Brian Ford, Harper, and Howard. Black male educators are often understood to have a predetermined role in the classroom as disciplinarians or coaches, and not as academicians. Brian Ford stated that these preconceived notions held by Black male educators, employers, place limits on the Black male's job. Many African American males that go into teaching are hired in school as coaches, PE teachers, APs, whose duties mostly consist of discipline or supporting sports programs. As these men are pigeonholed in these positions, their influence and impact are limited. Their effect on their own demographic of students is concentrated in discipline and in sports. This creates a cycle of African American male students seeing a majority of their African American role models in coaching positions or in ISS or ALC as they call it in my school. And so the stigma shows up not only in K-12 schools, but even in the demographics of college populations. In 2009, Black men made up 3.6% of undergraduate students at public NCAA Division I institutions, but comprised of 55.3% of the Division I football and basketball teams. You can see a very drastic change in statistics. It should also be noted that, again, there have been many calls for Black men to fill teaching positions, but little research on recruitment efforts have existed. According to the content analysis of the empirical research on Black male educators performed by Young and Young, this topic is a nuanced one that in recent years has started to gain more traction. This study that I performed is another topic when I wish to add more. All right. Organizations like Real Men Teach and NYC Men Teach are wonderful, great programs that help encourage Black men and people and men of color and just men in general to stay in teaching careers and stick in programs through the hardships, through the somewhat lack of preparedness in their K-12 education. And they do that through career and education support programs. So with this project, I hope to, like I said, not fact find, but really find more answers to the question of why there's a low percentage of Black males in teaching. And some of the research questions that I guided the study were, what are some perceived factors that deter Black men from teaching the profession? What are some perceived barriers that prevent Black men from going into the profession? And what are some reasons that lead Black men to leave the teaching profession? It should be noted also that this thesis that I performed was through the lens of critical race theory. It's a hot topic recently in recent days. And just to give a quick overview of whoever does not know, critical race theorists argue that because subordination of non-white ethnic groups was placed in effect at the inception of American society, is ingrained in the nature of society. Racism, subordination, and ethnocentric hierarchy play a major role in virtually all societal systemic institutions. This is some of the first four tenets of critical race theory, noticing that racism does exist, and that's ingrained in a lot of our institutions. Being colorblind to race does not solve the problem, but only allows for non-minority groups to act like their skin does not get them in higher places. Again, and the main point that I really loved about CRT was that it focuses on the act of counter storytelling, where you focus on the populations that have not been historically discussed, and their stores have been mismanaged, old, and so I wish to kind of do that as well for this study. And the interest conversion again of color, the interest convergence of white majority populations and minority populations says that progress doesn't really happen unless the majority agrees as well. And so that's just a little summary. And then the next three, historical revisionism examines the historical context and historical importance of minorities in history. Sometimes in history classes, I think they're a little bit better now. The kind of whitewashing that happens where like the founding fathers, these like legendary heroes and things like that, but it doesn't tell the full story of their kind of skeletons, literal skeletons in their closets. And also, again, incorporates the concept of racial realism. And this, they argue that race is a social construct that creates a hierarchy of benefits in villages. And the number 7, the last tenet, it theorizes that meritocracy is not real in America. There are people that get privileges based off of color. And then just some summary of the lit review that I did perform during this study. There were 4 main topics that came up during the lit review. The first really large one was the racism that experienced by populations in teaching. The study where the research reviewed multiple Black male high school juniors who attended an urban North Carolina public school. Several participants agreed that schools were oppressive institutions where teachers who value the experience of African Americans and treat African American male students unfairly. They concluded also the same must hold true for African American male teachers. And so these Black male students are going into schools and seeing their Black male role models being treated unfairly and being oppressed, and made this observation. Bell 2017 interviewed a Black male who accounts feeling like he was only being interviewed to meet a Black male quota and wasn't really seriously considered as a candidate. And so like that, again, just another kind of layer into why a lot of Black males don't go into teaching. Another main topic that came up was identity dilemmas. In the study, they sometimes want to give up parts of their personalities to conform to the cultural standards of a typical white female-centric pedagogy and sacrifice of the Black identity. One article by C.P. James states the Black man must negotiate their identity to fit into the Black community and the American academic community, as if they have to live 2 lives living in one body. C.A. Warren, 2013, gave a personal account of his experience as a pre-service teacher and a predominantly white institution he had provided. And later as a novice Black male educator. Warren described that he felt insecure about how he presented himself in a sea of white female pre-service teachers. Then when he became a teacher, Warren's principal never gave him any pedagogical freedom. His teaching style was meticulously micromanaged to fit the white principal's perception of what excellent teaching looked like. Warren states that he lost pieces of his personality with each passing day. And I remember discussing that with Dr. Miranda, and she just let it kind of over her heart. And it is traumatic to go to a place where you want to love, but you lose yourself almost every day. So that's some of the traumatic things that you have to go through. Another common theme that came up was the perception of a teacher as a kind of just a woman's job. Graham and Irwin found that many of the males that they investigated, the Black males they investigated, held a typical image of a teacher as a female. When asked to draw a profile of a teacher for the study, 42 of the participants 42 of the 63 high school students drew a female teacher, while only 8 drew male teachers. 5 drew both male and female, and 3 indicated no gender at all, and 5 opted not to draw. So you can see how the kind of general image of the teaching doesn't naturally go to someone that looks like me, goes to a white female. Research shows that high school students perceive teaching as a woman's job and not. Another common thing that came up was just the overall negative perception of teaching and also discouragement of teaching. Bianco, Leach, and Mitchell found that a majority of Black male high school students that participated in the study viewed the teaching profession as somewhat disrespected to very disrespected. One student stated that he never heard from his teachers the benefits of teaching. Here are the laborious and negative sides of the job. Other articles mention the perception of low income and low job satisfaction of a teacher being another term for Black folks. Right? And now I want to go a little bit into the participants who I interviewed. I have to say I really enjoyed. I'm a math person, so I like numbers and like right and wrong and black and white. But to sit there and listen to their stories and hear their experiences, although some of them were a little traumatic, just to kind of be good for them, but just to hear their stories was just an amazing moment in my life. So I won't go into who they are and talk about what their life experience. And all these, they're going to be pseudonyms, so they don't sue me. Okay, so and just to recap, some of the interview questions that I did ask, I asked what made you choose a specific subject or discipline? Were you ever pressured or encouraged to take on an after-school club or activity or class that you're not passionate about? What was your experience like in grade school? How was or is your experience leading up to becoming a teacher? How did your family, society, upbringing, and any other outside factors affect the decision of becoming a teacher? And how did race specifically, how did race play a role in you becoming a teacher? And would you change anything about your current position, school environment, or atmosphere? And I did ask, Dr. King suggested for me to ask the question of like, well, only 2% of all American public school teachers are Black males. We all know that by the time we leave. And she wanted me to ask them, why do you think statistic is, as a Black male in teaching, why do you think that statistic is so low? And it did warrant a lot of interesting answers and a lot of confidence. So the first participant that I interviewed was Dr. Jesse Edwards. His background, he is a professor at the College of Education at HBCU here in North Carolina, in the Department of Educator Preparation Program. Before he became a professor, he started education as a 7th grade English teacher, and then he became an instructional coach for middle and high school beginning teachers. And then from there, he became a professor. While recounting his experience as a middle school student, he said, quote, that he found that his teachers have very low expectations of himself, and they didn't understand his personality or even try to form relationships with him. So he was always in trouble. He said this exact words. I think there was a huge cultural disconnect between me and my teachers growing up, and I really didn't like school that much. One experience that he gave and told was, as a middle school student, his teacher asked the class, like, what is this on the board? And he raised his hand and said, oh yeah, that's an example of alliteration, it's correct. But the teacher literally said, you're always being disrupted, get the hell out of church. And then she threw a book at the door and threw a desk at the door and told him that. Yes, him telling that story, I was just kind of surprised because I've never experienced anything like that as a Black male, but him going through that and kind of him saying that he was mostly in and out of trouble all the time was just hard to hear. And then again, he talked about the reason why he actually came back to being a teacher. He said that he wanted to impact others that were coming after him, and he wanted to create the change that he wanted to see and teach and make a positive impact. Dr. Peter Harris was the second participant that I interviewed. He's currently principal at an elementary school here in Tennessee. He was an elementary school teacher before and an AP before. He was also a curriculum facilitator. And he was on the fast track for school administration. He was only an elementary school teacher for a couple of years, but soon he led his works way up to be principal today. He said that, he said these exact words, that as a Black male teacher, he says that the world will always see him as a Black man who happens to be a teacher and not a teacher first. And like I said, if he's walking on the street, you won't see a teacher, you'll see a Black man. That's kind of the story that he's painting for me. He also said that he's experienced discrimination and microaggressions while completing his teacher ed program. He felt like his professor treated him differently than his other colleagues who were white females. He was the only male and the only African American man felt discriminated against. Kind of going through as a college student, I know it's a lot. I'm a college student right now. I'm going through all the stress of things and having to deal with something that you put your trust in is growing you to be who you want to be, has to be kind of. Mr. Reggie Young, he is a band teacher with a degree in music ed and a master's degree in executive leadership studies. Currently he's working towards a doctorate degree in educational leadership. He said that not a lot of Black men want to be at the foundation. He was referring to elementary schools and middle school teaching. A lot of them want to jump to high school and or be in admin for various reasons. Some salary, he mentioned salary. But he also said that he also mentioned the negative connotation and the consequences of being a teacher. Struggling, like I said, again, struggling with salary. Said that some nights he go a little hungry. And also, as a teacher, as a Black male, they expect you to have your discipline in check, basically, and be able to take care of all the problem students, all the trouble students, and going there every day and having all the problem kids also is a natural deterrent. And the last participant I interviewed was Dr. Vince Hill. He's a principal at a magnet school in NC. He has a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a minor in secondary education. And he was a high school student teacher, a high school science teacher, and he has a master's in school administration, and he was also an AP. This interview was the longest interview that I had, and probably the most eye-opening to me. As he was recounting some of his experiences as a principal in a school, he said that the PTA organization, the PTA organization were having secret meetings about him and how to get rid of him as a principal. He said that on Facebook, one of his parents, one of the students' parents, called him a raisin, a quote unquote raisin for Facebook. And he also mentioned, I don't want to go too deep into it, but just some of the kind of things that the PTA organization and the parents would let slide during the administration of the previous principal, the white principal, and how he came into administration. He wanted to focus a lot on the achievement gaps of Black and brown students in schools, and they didn't agree with that. The PTA organization didn't agree with a lot of his choices. They questioned him a lot, but like I said, underneath the other principles, there's a lot of legal activities that were not, that were turned, that they turned a blind eye to. And so, like I said, this goes to say kind of just like the experiences of Black Americans in the schools and Black Americans just in America in general were held to a higher standard than some of our majority. And he also said, just to give a recap of why he went into administration, kind of a contrast between what Virgin Young said. He wanted to make a bigger impact and a larger impact on the schools outside the classroom. Like I said, this is one of the reasons why he took a leadership role and to make a greater impact instead of just being in the classroom. Some other findings worth mentioning that I discovered while interviewing them. All of the participants that I interviewed either had a mother or a grandmother that was also a teacher. For Dr. Jesse Edwards, for Dr. Vince Hill, his mom was one of the teachers around him, so like he really didn't get in a lot of trouble because his mom was right there. And also another great discussion that I had with Dr. Jesse Edwards, the first participant that I interviewed, was that it's not just about race, it's about culture. There should be a culturally diverse group of role models that a student should see, not just racially diverse, because you and I could be the same race, but we could go through two completely different experiences. And our students are going to also be going through completely different experiences that they need to see, kind of see how they got on the other side. You know what I mean? Like how we kind of made it through whatever hardships we experiences as a growing adult. So in conclusion, so what now? As stated before, this research was meant to add to the previous research that has already been done. I hope to in the future to continue this research and dive deeper into interviewing more participants across the country and thinking about more recruitment efforts and how to keep Black American males in educational programs. And luckily for me, I'm going into teaching. And so like, I'll be able to be that role model for Black students and Black American male students. And I already see it right now in the students that I teach right now. And I just, I love the impact that I'm making, and I can see it on their faces. Just today, like my first, I was teaching 3 classes, now I'm just down to 1. And when I dropped that second class this week, they were like so surprised, like, what? Oh my God, you're leaving? Oh my God, no. It was like this whole thing had to calm down. Like, guys, I'm still gonna be here. I'm still gonna be sitting right there. But they're gonna be a rude awakening when I graduate. So, and so like I left this kind of very open-ended because, like I said, I do want to continue this research. And references, like all that jazz, yeah. And then questions, anybody have any questions?
As someone who is also in an industry that is very much dominated by white women, I thought it was very interesting to read your whole everything. And I think it's very interesting that I practice exists in education, and here there's this sort of perception, and also in the collegiate space, this sort of perception of, oh, you know, you get the advantage of being the minority by practicing another white woman. Which, well, obviously super kind of right? But you know, especially in the theater space, it's not that there are, you know, tons of opportunities for Black persons. Like you will, the only reason that you will see a lot of people of color in the same shows is that way. If it's a Hamilton or if it's a Lion King or if it's something
that.
Detroit 67.
Detroit 67. And I would bet that there's probably similar pockets in education of certain schools and certain, districts that are zoned certain ways that have a higher population of those teachers. So what impact do you think having those pockets of educators in the same space as opposed to getting to kind of spread out? How do you think that affects things?
I think that a lot of, like when you get a job, you just kind of getting in where you fit in. And if, as a Black male, I find myself most comfortable in this space, then where I could thrive and make the most impact on my students, then I'm going to go to that area. But for some others, for other teachers, they might think, well, I need to go somewhere like country hit USA where I might be the only Black person up in there. And that's the way I can make the most impact. So I guess it just depends on, your preference and who you are as an individual, and just like I said, and who you're called to be, where you're called.
I also just wanted to point out something very interesting as a neurodivergent person, like we all go through that little not like other girls phase over in the middle school. But I kind of did have that phase because it really well for years the same way. And I never had a teacher that was openly neurodivergent until I got to college. So I would be so interested to see this project of yours, which is brilliant, applied to LGBT teachers or neurodivergent teachers and other races. I think you did a really good work here, and I hope that catches on.
Thank you. To that point, like I said, I don't think not that I've known of, met a neurodivergent. I don't think any of my teachers were, but they didn't make known to me that they were neurodivergent. I did have one gay teacher in high school. He was my calculus teacher. Love calculus. I know y'all hate on calculus, but I love calculus. So yeah, I think that is an interesting notion to think of the kind of different demographics, like the different stories that students becoming teachers have, growing up, becoming a teacher, and being like, well, I have this, I'm a minority in this area, so I really think I can do a good job in this area because of the fact that there's so much up against me. And so, yeah, that's an interesting thought. Yes, Bob.
I have two questions. What drew you to middle school? Number one. Number two, this is so obvious, I'm almost embarrassed to ask it, but did this project make you more excited about becoming a teacher, or did it just make you depressed, or did it do both?
Okay.
Or did it, how did it affect you?
Okay, so your first question, what drove me to middle school? I
said Drew, not drove.
Oh, well, okay, I don't know. What drew me? I'm still going there. I initially was going to go towards high school teaching and even progressing towards the collegiate level. But I realized that I want to have more of an impact on my students at the foundation level. Mr. Reggie Young and President White stated that I think at the elementary and the middle school level, you still have time to kind of mold and shape a student and kind of help them. I think you still have time as a high school student, but a lot of their issues, like I'm still kind of going through them right now, so I don't think I can help them out as much as I'm doing the same thing as you. And also, I think the math of middle school, like 6 through 9, it's an intro to algebra. It's a lot more real world, if you want to say, than going towards calculus, even though I love it, but like it's still really higher level thinking that like you don't really require on a daily basis. There's a lot more avenues to use middle school math, and that's what I wanted to do when I taught it. I wanted to make sure that my teaching was not just for the birds. I don't know what to say about the birds, but useful and kind of useful to my students. So that was your first question. Your second question, I'm not a quitter, and I know as I was interviewing these participants, they gave me a lot of negative experiences that I might potentially have to go through. But I know that I was made for them. I mean, I really can't see myself doing anything else right now. But I know that I would not have gone this far to kind of give up now by their kind of testimonies and experiences. But like I said, it was very eye-opening. It was very yeah, it's very eye-opening. I think it's a good word. And I'm doing all right. Yes, what's up? Brother.
I know you like touched a little bit about like how Black male educators they fall into certain stereotypes of their educator and coach. Do you think it's like kind of like pushed into them, or is it more like kind of like, oh, I was an athlete in high school as well, and I've been an athlete at the college level, and I just want to do this for other athletes as well in my career as an educator. Like, what can you expand a little bit more on that?
Okay, so that goes again to the kind of gray areas of like participant research. There are some that do want to do that just because they were an athlete and would like to teach and be a coach as well. But there are some experiences, some people that go into teaching are kind of like pushed into doing that. Actually, Jesse Edwards, the first participant that I interviewed, he mentioned that when he first came to his school, that they were like, oh, well, no, you don't have to do anything. Don't do any extra clubs or like, don't do that, don't do any sports. But then that second year came around, and the admin started asking, so, you want to do a sport or are you going to do an activity? And he didn't see that being asked by, he didn't see them asking any of his other colleagues in teaching as well. So like I said, there's two sides to that. And to your point, yeah, there's some people that do want to go into coaching, they actually do want to do that, and there's others that are kind of pigeonholed and kind of pushed. Yes, John.
I think what I have to say is more of a statement than a question. But I know for a fact that I'm students, for the rare of life students, I'd say that we experience in schools and such not where I either feel any of the problems. Like maybe there's a situation that might have happened that I noticed, but most of the time, like you were saying about how Black student teacher you have to take care of or like disciplinary actions, stuff like that. Most of what I saw was like Black teachers doing that or something like that. And just a few other examples where I feel like I'm the exact opposite. And it wasn't until maybe college I started to realize that, but only just like people like you who are out here just doing that stuff. So I'm kind of very grateful for you being able to do this. And I'm very happy with your message that you have. And hope that things teaching work out.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Pretty simple, but you know,
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, everybody has different experience. Like I never was in ISS or out of school suspension, but I did see some of my like Black friends. They were like always in ISS or always out of school for some odd reason. You know a question? Oh yes.
This is it. Easy one. Did you might have said this in the beginning, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but you had made a point of saying that all of the people that you interviewed were legacy educators. They had a mother or grandmother who was a teacher. Did you? I'm just curious what.
Yes, actually, yes, I forgot to mention that. Yes, my grandmother was actually a teacher before she retired. So. And
do you feel like that's partially what inspired you, or is it more so your personal experience in school?
I think it's a little bit of both. Definitely a lot of my personal experience, Like, I mean, in school, I was always helping my classmates, especially math. I love math. Love math. I was helping them with their math, like problem tutoring. Like, I'm still tutoring. Well, I'm student teaching. Obviously, that's my career path right now. But tutoring, was tutoring. And I remember in third grade, like even in third grade, if I knew the answer to something, like even though like the teacher may be like raised over it, she didn't really say it, or she, I would ask the question anyway, just so everyone else was clear and like knew what I was thinking, and like that, like I think she might have, she said that kind of, but she didn't really kind of say it. So like I just asked questions to like, clarify it. So like have like little stories like that to see like I'm not a teacher right now. And like we have to show that with my family. Like, my grandma's like the smartest one in the bunch, even though like she sometimes she'll be just kind of sitting and kind of watching and talking, but then she'll be smart as a little and just have come with that real quickly. So yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Dr. Rich.
That's what I wanted to do this dissertation on. Is the legacy connection, especially if there's a difference between black female teachers and black male teachers, and whether or not there's a legacy connection. I think there's a lot there. And I know we talked about that when you told me that. But something to come down really quickly. But the other thing is just, because I'm thinking about, because I know who each of these people are, obviously. Everybody their identity, but in thinking about it, I mean, a couple of them are at very predominantly white schools, right? And one in particular that I'm thinking about, when he arrived at that particular school, there was only one black teacher on my campus at all. Now there's 7 that I'm aware of. So I wonder, okay, it would be great if you could follow up with some of these guys about, how has the recruitment of other teachers of color, like, has that been something you've been very purposeful, or did it just happen where they weren't actually applied because they saw a familiar face, because they felt more comfortable, like they may be treated differently, those types of things would be interesting. Follow some of those questions.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I definitely noticed that educators do a lot of things with intention, even admin, and like they do with intention. I'm not sure if you're talking about him, but Dr. Peter Harris, he mentioned that that was his goal to purposely put more Black teachers in the classroom. So he did that with a purpose and intent. So yeah, that would be interesting to kind of see the impacts that he's experienced and kind of impacts that other principals have experienced, putting more Black males and just Black teachers and more closely diverse teachers in their classroom, and seeing the kind of impact that would have on their students and on their achievement, on their overall kind of quote unquote enjoyment of school. If you can see yourself in one of your teachers, might not seem like such a drag.
Yeah, because I think about that one talking about there's teachers with there's some hair now, teachers with visible tattoos. That's not,
Yeah, my high school teacher, he my college teacher, well, not to like he was gay, and he also had sleeves tattoos. And it didn't throw me off. And also one of my teachers, one of the EC teachers at my school that I'm student teaching right now, she also has sleeves. She has tattoos. So like I said, nowadays it's getting we're becoming a lot more comfortable having these kind of conversations, right, and being more diverse with our who we allow to be a teacher. And so like I said, it's an interesting kind of progression. It's done. Good.
In the way I was holding it for teacher-centric, but what other ways in other professions do you think that this same thing is applied? The message of this.
Okay. So if you want to not even talk about, I can talk about gender. Some some women, they're denied roles because of the fact that the role is more of a male job, like CEO, or a CEO or president of a company. They kind of, some employers ask them, like, do you have any kids? Because they're thinking like, well, okay, if you have kids, are you gonna have to take off or this, that, and the third, or different children? And so like I said, if you don't even want to talk about race, that's one other kind of topic that we can kind of go into, the discrimination of some minority populations in different fields. Like I said, that deserve respect. Yeah, go ahead.
This isn't a question, but I just want to plant the idea in your head because you have a really lovely speaking voice.
Thank you.
And like, I'm not a podcast person, but if this project continued and we do a podcast,
Thank you. I appreciate that. Go ahead, Dr. Lara.
Trevor, not exactly related to your research, but I can't help sitting here. By chance in your research, you talked to Samantha.
I did talk to her a little bit, just to kind of get an idea of how the overall kind of balancing of being a student teacher and doing this, talking about that. And so like she said, don't stress out too much about it, kind of, even though she was stressed. I could tell she was stressing. But yeah, I didn't really talk to her. I didn't talk to her about the project per se, but kind of just like during my overall experience going through this. So yeah. A lot of similarities, like I said.
But their stress is probably
Like I said, I was almost a high school major like she was, but I decided to go into school. So, then, yeah. Any more questions?
Great job.
All right, thank you.